My name's John Newham, and my question to the panel is, given the Home Secretary's request that she should have more power, would it actually, this so-called snoopers charter, would it actually do and make any difference?
I think that's the first one for Ben.
I'll start because I basically, if you'd, about 5 weeks ago, you could have seen on the front page, my name on the front page of the Times as one of a number of academics that signed a letter against the Snoopers Charter. The academics who signed that letter basically do not believe that it would be an effective countermeasure against those types of attacks, but that on the other hand there is a very real risk that it will be used for all sorts of fishing expeditions and to invade the citizens' privacy and so on. I think there's a very sort of like simple analogy you can use here. You don't. If you ask law enforcement people, I think that, what information should we record about people and how long should we keep it? Their inclination is always to say everything and forever, because you never know what might come in handy. But on the other hand, we've had very good studies showing that you don't make the finding of a needle in the haystack easier if you keep making the haystack bigger and bigger. And so basically targeted quality, reliable intelligence is what we need, not collecting data on everyone.
Ben,
all
you're
the
nodding.
time.
Yeah, so the Snoopers Charter is perhaps one of the most misguided bits of legislation I've ever had the displeasure of having anything to do with. It is, and forgive me for this august panel and room and so on, but it is deepest bullshit. It is awful. I could go on for a long time about why it's awful, but I will give you some bullet points. The first one is that it won't work. So the first reason is that if you are in any way competent criminal, then you can use encryption, which means that anybody who's got a copy of your message won't be able to read it. So instantly, it means that we're only catching incompetent criminals. The second thing is that it's going to cost an enormous amount of money. It's budgeted at least $3 billion, and that is a government IT project, so let's say $30 billion.
If it's ever delivered.
If it's ever delivered in the first place. Thirdly, it is, the risk of mission creep is so massive that in any liberal democracy, we should be very, very suspicious of it. There have been many additions to the investigative powers that the police have over the past few years, which have been used by local councils. They've been used by all sorts of dubious bits of government to find all sorts of things that those laws weren't put up for. It's, and on that level, it is also, I always think it's a general rule of thumb for any civilized society that we don't build infrastructure that could be used by Nazis. It's a very bad idea to build a national eavesdropping infrastructure on the dominant communications medium, because you may well, you never know. The current government may well be whiter than white. They may be purer than pure. The current intelligence community may well be absolutely without reproach. They may be, they may have checks and balances as far as the eye can see. I don't trust the next lot, whoever the next lot are. So we shouldn't, by definition, be building stuff that could be used by baddies, because we have baddies, right? On top of that, there is a, so you have all these risks, but then sometimes when I'm on panels like this discussing this very thing, I actually start to draw a bingo chart to share amongst the speakers, because usually the same things come up: terrorism and child porn. Usually those two things. And those of you who are going to mention that, you can calm down, right? So So the first thing is, so you say, well, yes, but it's all very well, but what about child pornography? Well, yeah, that's true. There are some edge cases of things where you would want to be able to find these people, immediately through any means necessary. But that's not how government works in a democracy. We have to find a balance between not building infrastructure which is fundamentally usable for evil, and preventing evil preventing an edge case evil in the first place. The Woolwich beheading, which of course was utterly awful, would not have been prevented by being able to read those people's emails, even if we knew who they were in the first place beforehand. But of course we didn't. So it means that for it to be successful to catch the baddies in retrospect, we have to be reading everybody's email, which gets us to the final point, which is that there aren't enough of us left over to read everybody else's stuff. Only 2 countries have ever tried to do this, right? East Germany with the Stasi and North Korea. Neither of those places feature on my holiday list, right? And so we have to be very careful. There is a tendency, and this comes with cyber warfare as well. There is a tendency within government and also within the military to say, yes, but surely somebody could do something. We're Britain. We invented the bouncing bomb. We have boffins in sheds. Surely somebody can invent some technology which will prevent it. And the problem that we have with all of these things, whether you're talking about this or copyright reform or cyber warfare or anything like that, is that the internet is fundamentally completely different to anything we've ever seen before. The borderless post-geographic future, which is exactly what Alex was talking about, in terms of state-on-state warfare, means that the home guard type of thing, the sort of Maginot Line, we're in Great Britain, we could put up, we could lower, we could lift the drawbridge on cyberspace and we could police it, is impossible unless you become North Korea. So I don't like it, to be frank.
I think it's time. So,
Am I live?
we are fairly limited on time. We have fairly tight questions and fairly tight answers.
Sorry.
And I need to go and get my watch. So.
David Spratt, I'm a biomedical scientist. One of the most effective ways of taking over a city the size of London is to fly over, drop Norfolk virus or winter vomiting bug, and whilst everyone's in the bathroom, move in. Is there an electronic virus that nobody's thinking about, or is there potential for one, that nobody's thinking about that can creep in behind the toilet roll holder and just stop the country?
Yeah, it's called Facebook.
Can I have a go at that? If it is, it'll happen in a way you least expect it. There are millions of viruses being created every day, and the problem is that no one really knows what they do. I call it the cyber ghost. And the problem being is that something will do something daft that you'd never really, just like a real virus. And we see it all the time. I mean, a number of times I've looked at systems that have gone down, and you find out it wasn't a virus at all. It was somebody who's put a piece of code in somewhere that's caused what's called a divide overflow, which basically says to the computer, I don't really know what to do this, so I'm going to stuff a whole lot over there and go blue. And the problem is that the computers are in everything. I can't reveal the detail of this one, but I've been asked to look at the EEPROMs on cars. And this is quite an interesting one, because in order to service your motor car, somebody's got to plug into it. And in order to plug into it, they've got to have an access point. Yeah, well, that was all very well until some people started putting Bluetooth connections. And if you, at the moment, this is what we call trickle down. If you ever, I know that you all have Maseratis, so it's okay. But if you had a Maserati, you don't take it to the garage ring you up and tell you what you need to do to it. The reason being, it's got a radio chip in it. The problem is, people are putting those chips in for all sorts of different reasons. And is that where it would happen and how it will happen? Well, actually, the whole eastern seaboard of the United States power grid was taken down. Nothing to do with the power supply at all. You can read it on the internet. It was to do with the billing system as to how you get the electricity, how you charge the electricity system. And basically, it overloaded the billing system and said, I'm sorry, Ohio, but you've overbilled. You've bought too much electricity, we're going to cut you off. And the billing system cut it off.
If I can add to that with a serious answer.
It wasn't serious.
No, mine wasn't. Yours was serious, mine wasn't. I'm going to give a serious one now to sort of back you up. Vaguely serious. The other thing to realise is not only will the attack, should there be a catastrophic one, and there will be, absolutely. Just weird stuff happens all the time. It will either be out of unintended consequences or unintended complexity, or I think it'll be more likely be out of a non-state actor doing something slightly dodgy, which has deep repercussions. So I'm a fellow at the Brookings Institution in Washington, and I gave a talk there about cyber warfare, and I pointed out that if you define cyber warfare, or if you define warfare as the destruction of stuff to cause some form of political, change, and cyber warfare is doing that but with digital things, with numbers, effectively. Barclays Bank and their friends rigged the LIBOR rate, right? Now, that caused enormous amounts of loss of money to people who had to pay more than they should have done. Right? I think the city of Baltimore went bankrupt because of the LIBOR fixing scandal. If the LIBOR rate had been fixed by a virus written by the Iranians, we'd be at the UN right now. The fact that it was done by a private company, now admittedly a private company with perhaps more people in it than Iceland, and certainly more money than Iceland, and perhaps more land than Monaco, so, country-sized, but still a private company. The fact it was a private company just meant that the directors got a couple of million quid and told to go and sit on the beach for a few years. And so to add on to your, the Tallinn Code, I think not only are we going to start to see kinetic warfare state on state because of things like that, but the battle space has become much, much more interesting because not only do we have countries against countries and countries being taken out by mistakes and errors and just unintended consequences of weird coding things, but also small groups of not even necessarily malicious people, but vaguely criminal people who get together and do a thing because it will make them some cash. And what they don't realize is this hits that, which 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 means that Baltimore goes bust and they can't pay their street sweepers, which means that when it snows that weekend, nobody can get to hospital and 100 people die. That's when I was talking about complexity earlier, is the problem, is sort of the kick on. And because we look at warfare and security on a nation-state basis, because we're fighting the last wars, then we'll never address these things. Personally, I think the LIBOR fixing people should have gone to The Hague for war crimes, because that was an active non-state cyber warfare. They did more damage than any, second-degree terrorist. But they were a bank, so, whatever.
Right, another question. Charles, you've got a lady there in red.
It did go down well in Washington when I said that.
Hello, my name's Jabida. I run a science meetup group, which is why I'm here. But my question, I think, is for Ben, but Angela and Alex touched on this too. A couple of years ago, I was part of the Shoreditch Digerati, which means that I lived about 3 or 4 years ahead of the curve, and I saw amazing technology, where you're controlling a cursor with your mind rather than with a mouse or anything physical. I saw you brush your teeth and your GP receives your insulin levels, all of that stuff. I saw this, from 2007 onwards. Now, what's happened is that I'm in the health and social care sector. And I meet with people from Alzheimer's Society and other organizations where we work with people with physical disabilities. To me, of course, it's obvious where this technology comes in handy. One day, all of us, I have a stroke, I can't move my arm, technology is going to allow me to still use my arm. It's obvious to me. But I meet these people, and they're like, I literally get physical reactions where people go, oh, that's freaky. And I think, hold on, but you work with people with physical disabilities, with mental disabilities, and you cannot embrace this technology and see how it's going to help us all. Not just in our old age, but we all, people get disabled when they're young. My question to the panel is, how do I bring this sector, the health and social care sector, along with me into the future, or for me, actually, into the present? This technology is here today, where people who cannot move can still move. Why won't they come with me, and how do I make them come with me?
So Arthur C. Clarke said that sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And magic freaks people out. He didn't say the last bit. I said that bit. I think with that particular case, it's back to the thing I said right at the beginning of the evening, which is that technology is, the future is already here, it's not evenly distributed. There are plenty of people around the world who are using these technologies. The Japanese are very big on it. If you go to Walter Reed in Bethesda, with the amputee soldiers there from the American Special Forces, they're all using these things. The mind control devices, Mattel sell it. It's a toy. You can buy it in Toys R Us for about 100 quid. If you've never used a mind control game, you're totally missing out. That's super awesome. But about 100 quid. Hamleys have got them. Brilliant. I think it's really a matter of this technology is moving so fast, it's getting so cheap and so ubiquitous that you just have to wait a couple of years and they'll have the idea for themselves because they'll see their kids playing with it. It's just a matter of waiting. We have to remember that this stuff is really new. For most people, the internet is no more than 500 weekends old. And that's just the internet, never mind mind control stuff. I said the word mind control, I could see minds exploding in front of me. Andrew's probably the...
Well, there's sort of 2 points I would make. One is, is you'd have to, some people might worry how safe it is to use. And I think on past form, they are right to be worried, because we already have implant technology that's used in various ways, and including, for instance, pacemakers. I can point you to the academic papers that show, how easy it actually is, just as with a car, to basically hijack, subvert, and control that. And I think when we're designing these kind of things, we've got to basically, rather than always rush out and go ahead with something that is possible, also sort of spend a little time of sitting down and thinking about how we make it so this technology is sufficiently robust, so it can't be very easily attacked.
One question over here, Giles.
Can I just add to that, if I may?
Sorry, yes,
It's a very
sorry,
simple answer to your question. And as a nasty commercial lawyer who sees new technology across his desk on a weekly basis, it's very simple. It's called money. Beginning, middle, and end. Right at the moment, if I go out for investment for a client, I can definitely get you investment for a light bulb that's cheaper to produce. I can't get you investment for one that glows brighter, because investors will invest in things which are proven, and occasionally you will get somebody where the spark jumps the gap, and he's willing to go that extra yard to do something that's never been done before. But it's rather like, do you want to be Da Vinci or School of Da Vinci? Most investors want to be School of Da Vinci. They don't want to be Da Vinci, because Da Vinci leads to bankruptcy.
Yeah, dangerous. Giles, could you one over here? Denzel.
Denzel Sharp. As an ex-military helicopter pilot flying in the Cold War, we were constantly subjected to East German electronic warfare. And I nearly wrote myself off on a number of occasions as code books fell off my lap, ready to jam the aircraft controls. Ultimately, when we had cyber stalemate, we sent a person or we took a physical document to get our message through. My question to the panel is, what alternative systems or what alternative work is being done as a complete alternative to the use of cyberspace for the many tasks that we have?
I heard a fantastic comment from a friend of mine who is military the other day, who it was called Go Woodchip. Go Woodchip was, don't put it on the radio, write it down. And the fact is that we do adapt. I actually, in the paper that I hope you'll get a chance to read and use for lighting the barbecue or something, I've actually talked about partitioning the net. And I can foresee an age when the global connectivity creates subsystems that are just not connected. As a part-time helicopter pilot myself, I can't even read the manual, never mind operate a code book at the same time, and try to listen to someone in a Belgian accent trying to tell me that I'm flying the wrong way up his runway. So, yeah, and that comes back to Angela's point, which is KISS, keep it simple, stupid. Most of us learn things, and your profession is spot on. If you didn't put 80% of what you do in back of mind, your workload would blow your mind every time you lifted the collective. So we put so much in back of mind. We have to work out ways of putting things in back of mind. And Angela's absolutely right. We use passwords. What have I got at home? Admittedly, I put it in the safe. I wrote down all the damn passwords because I've got hundreds of the blasted things. And how many times do I have to ring home to my wife and say, do me a favour, will you tell me what my password is? So it's about workload, it's about different, but we will adapt. And that's the interesting thing, because humans work individually and collectively to adapt. It's why democracy works. There was, I just wrote it down a minute ago, but there was a wonderful comment made by an MP on an evening's question I went to. I said, is government about inspiration or management? He said, he thought about it and he said, nah, it's like trying to play a marionette with half the strings cut. He says, because what you put in isn't what you get out. Because people just don't do what they're meant to do, however much you try and control them. And that's the glory of democracy.
So, do we have a question somewhere down? No. Well, this gentleman here, yes, please.
Do you think you'll ever get to the stage where each country has its own internet? I mean, I don't know if some totalitarian states do now to stop their citizens looking at the internet, but do you think you'll come to a stage to protect the privacy of that country's internet? Everyone will just have a different one, and there'll be like sort of customs to get to another one.
So that's a
Great
question. That is a very fine question. The answer is yes and no. Let me tell you why. So that's already happening in some places. So you're right. So there are some countries, totalitarian regimes at the moment, who try to have their own sort of internet. And within the borders of their countries, they set up sort of censorship systems which prevent some things from coming in, some things from going out. So North Korea is a very good example. China is a very good example. Some of the Middle Eastern countries. You'll be happy to know that all the technology to do this is British sold. Yeah, yes. So it doesn't work. Yeah. So yes, you have that. The problem that you have with this, however, is a thing that the American State Department called the dictator's dilemma. And the dictator's dilemma is that when you get the internet into your country, you get lots of really cool things. The ability to communicate with everybody around the rest of the world means that you can trade with them. It means that your academics get smarter. It means you can, like your culture gets more interesting. You can watch Lady Gaga videos on YouTube. You can do all these things, right? So you get all the cool stuff that you get with the internet, which effectively makes you cleverer and richer. If you want to be cleverer and richer, which most dictators do, certainly the richer bit, then you have to have all the other stuff, which is it also brings in ideas that you might not want to have a dictator. And it brings in other stuff. And so many countries try to have their own sort of internet thing, but the temptation to break a little hole in it to get some of the good stuff is overwhelming, because they're like, oh, but if we connected to the rest of the world, we could have Amazon, or whatever the equivalent would be. And they do that, and then it breaks a bigger hole, and the hole gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Now, there are many countries, the UK is one of them, where there are people who want to, and in fact do in the UK, censor what comes into the UK. You don't know this, probably, but the UK internet is censored by a non-governmental agency that set itself up, and the Home Office basically said to the internet service providers, do what they say or we'll make this into a law. And because it involved child porn, nobody argued against it. But we have a censored internet here, just as they have in many other places. So the answer is yes, we already have that, but the answer is also no, because the whole cool bit about the internet is that it's post-geographic. It doesn't have any borders.
I agree with that, and I think, in fact, I wish I'd said it. But I think there's an interesting, again, I can say this, obviously it means I must have actually thought about it, but these, in the paper that what I wrote, as Morecambe and Wise used to say, I looked and thought about it. It's a really, really, really good question, this, by the way. What I did look at is if the conduit has got two ends on it. And at the moment, what we're doing is we're sitting at one end going back, back, back. Until we actually realise, and there's a little bit of law here, we've got a thing called the infosock directive, which says, provided that you're a mere conduit without knowledge, as the bit in the middle, you're not liable for anything that goes down it. But what about if I'm sitting at this end and I go, oi, you, Mr. ISP, I've got all these malevolent packets all coming from this range of IP addresses in China. Shut it down. Yeah. Now, we've had the first series of civil cases, largely driven by the media industry, certainly in the UK, where we've had injunctions granted for ISPs to close down blocks of addresses. And this happened last year. And actually, I don't think anybody's really realised how important that is in the context of geographical locations, because it now means that was for the music industry. We've got informal censorship on some material, so here comes the next one. Close China down. Because at the moment, the public international law and the private international law are slightly in conflict. That's why I majored tonight on this Article 51, the public international law. Because until nation states are willing to police their own individuals and sanction them for attacks on other states, the answer will be close them down. And it's coming a lot quicker. So it's a super good question.
To add another layer to that very quickly, on a technical level, you have that sort of borders, new sorts of borders being created. But you have to remember as well that actually on a cultural level, we already have country internets. So the internet that you look at, say, or the internet that we in the UK on average look at, is completely different to the internet that people in Russia look at, in terms of the sites that we go to, the things that are the cultural things that we're interested in, the ideas, the conversations, and all that. And so, one of the great when we talk about China and the fact that China is behind a big firewall, it's called the Great Firewall of China. And the idea is they've created their own internet inside it. And it's considered to be a very bad thing for human rights because they're not able to access Western material about democracy, for example. And the interesting question about that is, if the Great Firewall of China was to go away, would any Chinese teenagers go and look at Western documents about democracy? The answer is probably no. They will be on YouTube looking at kitten videos and Lady Gaga videos just like the rest of us. And so there are many layers of countries creating them that are starting to create themselves in cyberspace. Some are the nation states themselves replicating themselves in cyberspace, and others are like, I'm part of the nation of people who are really into space, and some people might be a part, some people in this room might be the nation who are really into, the nation in cyberspace who are really into the Twilight books, or Game of Thrones, or, goths, or whatever, vampires, whatever, whatever. And so you have these different types of nation at different layers, whether it's political, cultural, friendship, whatever.
Can I add one thing to this? We're all talking about the net. We've not actually even spoken about the subnet. Because what you see through Google is not the internet. The internet, below that, that's the tip of the iceberg. Below that is a whole array of communications which are based on numbers, digits, and ciphers, which are never, ever what we call spidered. The only thing you see is when Google goes out and it hits a website, it spiders it, and it grabs the information and it caches it in a huge bucket. But if you set up your communications protocol so that the Google spider won't work, you are invisible to Google, and you have to go hunting. And this is the world of hacks and cracks and black holes and wormholes. And I freely admit that having done this, I've written off more PCs by getting sucked into a wormhole that some bastard has hidden something in.
So the greatest network of that is a thing called Tor, T-O-R. If you ever want to be completely anonymous on the internet and you want to go and see some really cool stuff, download Tor, run it on your computer, and you can then access lots of other cool stuff. Now, Tor is used, there's a site on Tor called the Silk Road, which you can use. You can buy pretty much any drug you would want to buy on the Silk Road. It'll be delivered to your house. It's the Amazon for heroin, basically. Tor is very, very, very useful for the trading of all sorts of bad stuff and for lots of secret communications. Tor was invented by US Naval Intelligence and was made freely available so that dissidents and their own spies could use it to talk privately. Tor and PGP, if you get those two things, PGP is the encryption software. If you get PGP and Tor, both of which are freely available, very, very cheap download, very easy downloads, you get that, you are well on your way to being a top-class cracker, my friend.
Angela, would you like to make a final contribution?
The only problem is 99% of people who want to use it, who want to use PGP and Tor, can't figure out how to use it, and they blow their anonymity very quickly and get found out.
You also have a lot of visits to PC World to replace your hardware.